Good morning, Springfield and the Acts Ministry viewing audience. All over the world. Wow. Things are growing week by week. This is Tony Hammock with the new gold standard, and this morning I am so excited I can't hardly stand it. I've been looking forward to this particular show now for some time. I have a guest. What we'll do is I'll introduce this gentleman here in just a second, and then visit with him for a little while, and then, like we've done a couple shows here in a row, we'll cut him loose, and I'll do some housekeeping, and then we'll wrap up at the top of the hour and stuff. But Brad, you still with us?
I'm here.
I got to tell you, this gentleman's name is Brad Gibson. Brad is a pretty interesting character. I met him several months ago, and he works a lot with veterans. So today's show is going to be all about helping veterans with their financial needs as they retire. Rather than steal anybody's thunder, Brad, I'd like to introduce you if you want to say hello.
Yeah, hello, audience. It's a pleasure being here, Tony. I thank you so much for having us on, because, you know, that the Veterans Initiative, a part of our company, is something that's very near and dear to our heart. So I appreciate the opportunity to come online here.
Well, and a lot of people have heard this a couple times from me here lately, but, you know, the last 3 years, I've been, you know, helping my dad out, and he's now at the Missouri Veterans Home over in Mount Vernon. But, you know, that's been 3 years of education for me, and you know, I'd already had about 2.5 of those years when you and I met. And boy, I could tell you what, I can see where what you do is very, very valuable. I mean, these men and women, you know, have served their country, and I know I am grateful, as hopefully a lot of folks are and stuff. But why don't you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about Advocate Healthcare and this initiative.
Yeah, well, thank you. So Advocate Health Advisors, we started off in the early 2000s, and essentially what we got started for was because the Medicare space is confusing to everyone. So a lot of members, seniors in the communities, are trying to go through this cycle, and it's something that you need to go through once you become a senior and of age. But navigating the system has become very difficult with all the opportunities and questions that come about with it. So Advocate got started, and what we do is we work with our seniors and health insurance carriers and companies to help seniors make the right choice for their health care. Now, we are veteran-owned and operated. Darwin Hale is our CEO. So having a veteran initiative or a veteran department to specifically help our veterans was one of his main focuses also when getting started. So there's a segment of our company that works solely with veterans, and we go across the country to American Legions and VFWs and any kind of veteran service organization that we can work with to make sure that we're helping spread the word and talk with those veterans to help make those right choices. So I have with me on the line too Christina Lonegro, who is one of our initiatives coordinators for the company, and she is out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but she is traveling the country all the time working with all of these organizations. She's got over 30 years of membership enrollments, working with these, and I'll let her talk a little bit about her career and past, but she has been a great resource for a lot of our veterans to just call and ask questions to see how the inside workings of the VA hospital work with Medicare, or how they can get enrolled with the VA, because that's going to be one of the primary focuses that we work with as well too. So
Good morning, Christina.
Christina.
Good morning. How's everyone today?
We are wonderful here in Springfield, Missouri. It's 90 degrees today, and then tomorrow it's going to be 70. So fall will be here.
Well, thank you for having me on your show today, and thank you, Brad. As Brad had mentioned, one of the pieces of Advocate Health Advisors, and one of the things that sets us apart, is our Veterans Initiative. And we have 2 retired colonels who kind of head up our company. Darwin Hale is our CEO. He's a retired colonel in the Army, and Colin Wright is also a retired colonel in the Army. And our goal is and mission is to help as many veterans coordinate their VA health care and understand that VA benefit and how it can work with Medicare to give them the best overall health options.
Well, let me ask you this. You heard me say that I've been kind of helping my dad out for 3 years, and boy, I hope I'm not wrong here, but it just seemed to me there was just a lot of knowledge, and I guess I wonder about those veterans that, by the time they get that age, they don't have a loved one there to help them out, and maybe due to whatever their situation is, they're not having access to how to find out this information. Is there anything that we can do, to improve on that?
So the very first thing I think that all veterans, and I'm the daughter of a Vietnam veteran and been brought up taking care of veterans most of my life. And one of the things that I have learned is that you want to make sure that you connect veterans with a veterans service officer. These are individuals who have received very specific and ongoing education regarding the benefits that veterans are entitled to. And there is so much to know about service connection versus a regular eligibility for receiving VA benefits. And that veteran service officer's training will help that veteran get connected with their benefits. So please make sure that when they're looking for somebody, they're not paying for that, because all of those services are free to that veteran. And if they ever have any questions, contact their local VA and find out who the veteran service officers are in their area, or contact veteran service organizations who would also be able to give them someone who they trust and that could help them.
Well, and thanks for mentioning that, because I got to tell you, I was amazed at how many solicitations that my dad was getting and I was getting, since I was involved and stuff, with do this, and then of course I'd find out what the price tag was. And we were very fortunate here in Springfield to get introduced to our Veterans Services person here locally and stuff. But at what age should they start trying to find that person and make that introduction?
So age plays somewhat of a role, and it would be for those individuals who have had a job and have received their health care through an employer. Most oftentimes do not need to access their VA benefit and may not qualify unless they have a service connection disability, something that resulted in illness or an injury that happened while they were in the service. So once they get to the point where they're eligible for Medicare, that's a time when they recognize that perhaps they might be able to now get their VA benefit because their income is less than when they were working, so they might be eligible based on their income. Or they may recognize that there are more things medically that they need to have addressed that have accumulated over time that might be associated with their service. So to answer that question, it truly is dependent on each veteran, but the majority is after they've completed working, their working years and they're retiring. That's, the most appropriate that individuals look, because their income changes and, things in their health will change. Maybe their hearing could be associated with their service, so they can get a hearing aid. But each individual will know if they have a health condition and they're younger, and that health condition could be related to their service because of what they might have been exposed to. So my advice to any veteran is, if they're having medical issues or conditions that could have resulted from their services, to talk to that veteran service officer. So you're never too young or too old.
Well, and so I guess my mind's wondering about disability. So if somebody is classified as being disabled, that means any age?
So if they are considered disabled through the VA, there are different levels of which they would be compensated. So there's a percentage that they're given based on how their condition affects their daily living. They can be rated a 10%, which would be a hearing loss. They're able to access VA benefits, but they do not receive any monthly compensation, all the way up to someone who could be 100% disabled, and that might be the result of several conditions, or it could be the result of a medical condition that has arisen based on their coming in connection with, for example, Agent Orange. You might have heard that term with a lot of Vietnam veterans. They might have a presumptive condition that then they could be classified as 100% because it has really affected their life.
Well, and I guess the other thing I'm kind of curious about is this wonderful thing called TRICARE. My dad ended up with TRICARE for life because he was in the Navy for like 21 years, I think it was. And that has been a godsend. But I understand there's different levels of TRICARE.
Well, TRICARE is for retired military.
Okay.
So you are in the service and you're put on TRICARE, right? After so many years in the service, you retire and you have TRICARE, but you're not 65. That's just TRICARE. When you become 65, now it's TRICARE for life. So there's really just two types of TRICARE and TRICARE for life, which would be after 65.
Okay. Well, and I guess...
And the spouse can also. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. What was that?
And the spouse is also eligible for that TRICARE benefit.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, and I guess the thing I'm wanting to, I guess, focus on just for a second is the coordination of all this for these veterans. I mean, because you've got Medicare, you've got TRICARE, you've got VA benefits, you've got Medicare supplements, you've got Advantage plans, and I don't know, maybe this is a bad question, but I guess what I'm curious of is which one should they focus on first and bring together so they've got all the pieces of the puzzle in the right place when they need it? Boy, that was a long question, wasn't it?
It sure was. And I first want to also thank your dad for his service. So please let him know that Advocate appreciates his service.
Yes, ma'am.
So for someone who has their VA benefit and they're wondering what they should do. So first of all, that veteran is never going to lose that VA health care benefit. Whether they have their Medicare Advantage plan or they have, just their VA benefit, they're not going to lose that. So that's number one. Number two is the advantage of them having a Medicare Advantage plan is the extra benefits that they can get. So, first of all, not all veterans qualify for a hearing aid. That's dependent on your service and whether it can be connected with your hearing loss. Not all veterans qualify for vision care or for dental care. Not all veterans qualify for transportation, which can be a part of a Medicare Advantage plan, that they can get their transportation to the VA to see their VA doctor. And you're not able to get a second opinion unless you have, a Medicare Advantage plan. If you have Medicare, you can also use that, but you're going to have extra financial responsibilities when you have the VA and you just have Medicare. Okay,
Mhm.
you're going to have all, because there's no maximum out of pocket with Medicare. So you're always going to have all of those copays that deal with just having Medicare. Plus, you're not going to have the extra benefits that a Medicare Advantage plan is going to have. The Medicare Advantage plan that includes all of these benefits that veterans otherwise can't get through the VA are things that a veteran needs to look at and see what health plans are in their area that are going to be able to work with their VA benefit to give them the overall best benefits or robust benefits that they're going to be able to improve their quality of life based on those benefits. And they're not going to have a lot of out-of-pocket cost for those benefits.
So what I hear you saying is that the Advantage plan is a top priority, or should be a top priority.
It should be, because in most cases that's going to be the least out-of-pocket monthly cost for a veteran to have a plan that will work with their VA benefit and will not impact them as much financially as would be some other options like a Medicare supplement plan. So that's one of the reasons why it works well with, you know, the VA benefit and a Medicare Advantage plan. Just having Medicare, they're going to have those out-of-pocket costs with their VA benefit. Having a Medicare Advantage plan, benefits.
And Tony, to kind of go back to your question about where to start, you know, when you're turning 65 and becoming that Medicare eligibility age, if you're not already enrolled through disability, it's important to make sure that you're looking at that Part B. And when we talk with veterans, a lot of it comes down to what their monthly income is and how much they can afford to take on. But the unfortunate truth is sometimes veterans are bypassing the Part B because they can't afford that $135.50 to come out. But what a lot of members don't know is Part A covers the hospitals and facilities of Medicare, and Part B is the doctors and everything that happens inside. If you delay that Part B, and let's say 5-6 years down the road, you have to go into Part B because your health conditions are getting worse, you will then be penalized at 10% per year that you did not enroll in that Part B. So you could end up paying more down the line for the coverage that you could have had up front. And by going with some of the Advantage plans, there are different incentives and give back plans that help reduce some of that Part B in certain areas. It's different, but that's something you definitely want to make sure you talk to someone about to look into.
Well, and that was going to be my next question is we've talked about, you know, connecting with a veteran service officer, you know, ASAP and stuff, but the veteran service officer wouldn't necessarily be able to help with the Advantage plan, would they?
So no, so the veteran service officer is going to definitely work with, you know, all of the benefits that come with the VA and the military organization. But when you're talking about the Advantage plans, you're going to want to make sure you reach out to a licensed agent and have those conversations. And independent brokers are usually the ones that are able to look at a couple different companies, couple different plans to make sure they find the right one that's for you. And those don't cost you anything either. So independent agents are compensated through the insurance carriers, and they should not cost you anything for those conversations.
Okay. And, you know, I mean, the three of us talking here on the radio, you know, we know Medicare and Medicare supplements and Advantage plans and stuff like that. But, boy, I tell you what, I'm just thinking there might be a lot of folks out there that kind of get Advantage plans and Medicare supplement plans confused. Is there anything, you know, a rule of thumb or a quick distinction so they realize if they are talking to a licensed agent, they're on the right track and so forth?
Yeah, that's a great question because so essentially to break down the Medicare process, there's three options that the general senior has to go with. Option one is you do nothing. So original Medicare itself outside of the VA facility only covers 80% of your medical costs. So if you are in Part A and Part B, 80% of that's covered underneath original Medicare. So option one is you do nothing. You take on that 20% risk with no max out of pocket. You also then have to look at any drugs if you want to do something outside if you're having prescription needs. Second option is that supplement plan that you were talking about, which has been around probably the longest. And what you do there is you're pretty much paying upfront a monthly premium for a company to pay that 20% of certain areas based off which supplement you go with. But you are paying those costs upfront, whether you use those services or not. So that could cost you anywhere, usually we would just say somewhere around $150 a month. It varies based off state and underwriting. But then you also look at a prescription drug plan, which helps cover the prescription drug part of it, which is roughly about $50 a month, give or take, across the country. So you could expect to pay somewhere around $200 a month for that upfront premium to help you with that 20% cost and drugs on a supplement and prescription drug plan. And then that third option is that Medicare Advantage plan that we've been talking about as well. And those are usually low premiums to no cost per month, which give you all of that 20% coverage and prescription drugs, but you pay co-pays as you go along. So instead of paying that $200 upfront monthly in a premium, you may pay a $10 primary care physician copay or a $35 specialist, just depending on the plan that you look at. And those independent agents should have access to both of those plans when you talk to them, either a supplement or an Advantage plan.
So it sounds to me like the deciding factor is their monthly income. That's a huge determination. So the three things that you would look at is who are the doctors. So if they're using any outside facilities for specialists, what are their drugs, and then what is their comfort level with income and payment. Correct. Is there a break point? Like if they make less than $32,000 a year, they should do an Advantage plan. Is there some number that they should have in mind? If they're above that, they should be looking at a supplement, or is it just case by case?
There's really not. It's all about comfort level. So you can have someone who has high income yearly, but they're wanting to take on an Advantage plan because they get some of those extra benefits that we talked about as far as the dental, the vision. And as an agent standpoint, they should be educating the member and giving them the options. And the member will need to make that choice on what they're comfortable with. So there really is no threshold that says, hey, you're at this level. You should go with this. It's about educating members about their options.
Okay. Christina, you still with us?
I am.
Oh, okay.
I'm still here.
Okay. Are you driving or did you pull over?
I pulled over.
Okay. Well, good. That's probably the safe thing to do, huh? Well, let's take advantage.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, let's take advantage of the fact that you're still with us. By the way, hey, thanks for your dad's service in Vietnam. And, hopefully he didn't have to deal with the Agent Orange and all that kind of stuff. But do you have any areas that you'd like us to visit on here in the last few minutes that we haven't touched on? Something that, would be important for someone who's getting close to that magic number of 65.
I would say that, someone who is getting close to 65 and they've never enrolled in the VA, if they are retired, they know that they might not have a service connection disability, make sure that they look to enrolling in the VA. Because the one thing I don't think that veterans know is that the budget for the VA is based on the number of those that are enrolled. So it does affect the budget when they're not enrolled in the VA. So that $2,200 per enrollee is not included when somebody doesn't enroll. So they need to make sure that they look at enrolling if they're retired or retiring based on their income. If they have a service connection, there's no age. They want to look into their service connection disability, get enrolled in the VA. There's multiple ways to do that. You can get enrolled online. You can reach out to a veteran service officer. You can walk into the VA. There's even a phone number that they can call to access the VA to do an online enrollment over the phone. They need to make sure they have their DD-214. So a DD-214 is the official discharge paper. If they don't have that, they want to already start looking to get it. It does take a few weeks to track it down through the National Archives, and so people who have served, they want to make sure they have that piece of paper before they start any enrollment process.
Now, isn't there a form, like if they can't find their discharge papers, this DD 214, isn't there a form they can get, I guess, offline or at the VA office in their community, fill out and send in, and then it goes in, and eventually they get an envelope with their DD 214 in it?
That's correct. They would be able to complete, it's called an SF 180. That's the form that they want to fill out, and they send it in, and then they will be sent their DD 214 in the mail.
Trust me, I did all this, so that's why I'm just trying to make a big deal about it on the radio here, because if you're not familiar with this, this is why show is very, very critical and important. Because I will tell you, I was a little bit amazed on the SF 180. The archives for us were in St. Louis, and I sent that in thinking it was going to be like a year, and really they turned it around pretty quick. I mean, it was just a couple weeks, and I got that information in the mail, and that was quite an interesting read. Going back through a 21-year career in the Navy as far as, and plus the fact that they didn't have word processors. You could tell it was all on typewriters and things like that. But anyway, I don't mean to digress there or anything. Maybe a bad question, but let me go ahead and throw it out there. Just I guess out of curiosity for me. So in our case, we needed to get Dad on the waiting list for admission into the Missouri Veterans Home. And there's about, gosh, I don't know, there's 8 or 9 of them around the state. And I imagine each state, has a similar system and stuff like that. I mean, that took a long time. And there towards the end, I think the only reason we finally got him in was that unfortunately he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, which has some dementia, which put him on the memory list. And that was one thing we learned, is in these Missouri, or at least in the Missouri Veterans Home, it's not just one waiting list. There's, I think, 3 waiting lists, depending on the level of care that they're going to possibly need. Is there, I guess where I'm going with this long-winded build-up to the question is there any way, like if somebody knows they're going to be like a level 2 or a level 3 of care, that they can go ahead and get on that list earlier as compared to having to, go through the whole process and be on list 1 and then eventually be moved to the other list?
So each state, of course, is a little different depending on the number of veteran homes that they have. And I think at any point where someone feels like their trajectory of the illness is going to continue to decrease, that they want to start looking at what options they have from a VA benefit perspective, and to see if their primary care physician at the VA will at least complete the paperwork to get things moving towards getting them on a list at a VA home. Some of the other things that they should probably look into is also aid and attendance. This is a program that can help them stay at home while they would be waiting to get into a veteran's home. This would help support from a financial standpoint the veteran to be able to stay home. So that I think the most important thing is to explain to any veteran service officer when they speak to them all of the needs of that veteran. So if they feel that they're going to need to have not only getting enrolled in the VA and completing service connection disability, that they are also in need of having help at home, complete all the paperwork at one time and send it in. That would be the best advice that I would give any veteran or their family.
And what was the name of that program?
It's called Aid and Attendance.
Aid and Attendance. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, I have seen a lot of folks, that's their preference, is to stay home as long as possible and stay away from the incredible cost of assisted living or skilled nursing homes, because they are not inexpensive, at least in this part of the country.
And aid and attendance will actually help pay for that type of care as well in a skilled nursing facility or in a personal care home, assisted living.
Wow.
The funds from that can also go towards that.
Yeah. Well, that is huge, because I know that there's a lot of folks out there that probably aren't aware of that, myself included. So that is good to know and everything. Hey, guys, your website, if I remember correctly, Brad, has at some point some information that veterans can tap into. Is that?
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
So our website is advocateforveterans.com. It's going to have licensed agents that you can call across the country. There is a talk-to-touch user option there available. There's testimonials, frequently asked questions, a lot of information on there just for you to stop by and help get yourself informed about what there is out there.
Well, and just for your guys' knowledge, this radio show is on the ACTS Media Group, which is part of the ACTS ministry here in Springfield, Missouri, and it's a worldwide ministry. And they actually have two folks whose ministry is for veterans. One is Matt's dad. Is it Bruce? Mm-hmm. Bruce.
Leo Froman.
And Leo Froman. There we go. And their ministry is all about helping veterans. So, Brad, I know that when you were in town a couple months ago, you got a chance to meet Bruce, and maybe in the future, if you're going to be in this part of the state, or Christina, if you're over in Missouri, maybe we can get you involved in a presentation or a meeting here, on a local basis and stuff. But I got to tell you, I am so grateful that you two joined us this morning, because this is a huge, huge thing. I mean, I can't say enough of some of the things I've seen, and our veterans need to be aware and taken care of because of some of the things they've done for our country, which is just amazing. And so thank you very much, Christina, for pulling over and giving us a call in so you can help out. Brad, you know how I feel about you, man. I mean, you're the only guy I know that'll return a call at 5 o'clock on a Friday. So
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all the work with it, and it's about helping each other and making things better. So thank you.
Okay. Well, hey guys, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go, and then Brad, let's you and I maybe try and visit sometime later today or tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks,
Tom.
guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. All righty. Well, you know what? That actually ended up being better than I anticipated, because that was just a lot of information. And I tell you what, if you missed some of it or weren't taking notes, or you have a veteran in your world, or you're a veteran, always feel free to reach out to me. My number's 417-755-0700. I'd be more than happy to attempt to answer your question. More than likely, I would steer you to Brad. Brad's out of Kansas City, and he, covers several states for Advocate Health Advisors, and he's very, very good, and he's very, very passionate. I mean, his dad also was in the service and so forth. So, that's why he and I kind of connected and so forth. But anyway, now we're to the point where I kind of wanted to go over a few things as far as housekeeping. And the first piece of housekeeping that I can think of is to remind everybody that October 10th, which is a week from tomorrow at 5:30, I'll be putting on a gold and silver workshop over at Prima's in Chesterfield Village. And we're going to have Ryan Long from National Gold Consultants, who was last week's guest on the show. He's going to literally drive from Minnesota down here to make this presentation. So let's not have him drive all that distance to not have a good turnout. I think the room there at Prima's, if you're familiar with that location of Prima's, the room's kind of in the back, and it's a fairly good-sized room, but I think it can hold 25 to 30 comfortably. and we're at about a dozen at this point. So we still got some space left. Hopefully in the next few days, those spots will be filling up and so forth. Ryan has said something about having a drawing that once everybody's there and he starts his presentation, there'll be a way to put your name in a little hat, and we'll be making a drawing for an ounce of silver. And so just so you can understand, here's an ounce of silver right here, and somebody will get an ounce of silver just for showing up. So we're excited about that. I think silver is, well, let's get into prices. That's the next thing on the housekeeping. Let me get over here. Hopefully my phone's working. Don't need that. Okay, so gold is $14.96 and 30 cents. We've had a little bit of a pullback, but that's healthy. I mean, that's kind of what you want when you're looking at a long-term type investment as compared to just going constantly up, because at some point, you know, it can't sustain that constant increase. Silver's up 25 cents today, up to $17.56. Platinum's at $8.89, and palladium's at $16.96, and rhodium as at $5,200. And I did something crazy. You know, last week we keep getting to rhodium, and everybody's, you know, wondering what rhodium does. So I went out and I found the definition of rhodium. So here's what rhodium is. Here's the definition and uses. Rhodium is a silver-white metallic element. It's highly resistant to corrosion and is extremely reflective. It is used as a finish for jewelry, mirrors, and searchlights. It is also used in electric connections and is alloyed with platinum for aircraft turbine engines. Another use is manufacturing of nitric acid and used in hydrogenation of organic compounds. Rhodium usage is dominated by automotive catalyst applications. Remember we talked about the catalytic converters, where it is used together with platinum and palladium to control exhaust emissions. So all three of those are used in the catalytic converters. Most of the supply of rhodium comes from South Africa, and then I can get into, you know, the historical highs and lows, which I won't bore you with. But I thought that was kind of handy. And then the next one, oh, let me get back to my pricing. Hold on. Don't go away. Now these are by pounds, okay? No longer by ounces, by pounds. Copper is $2.56. Nickel is $7.98. Aluminum 76 cents. Zinc is $1.06. Lead is 94 cents, and uranium is $25.80. And Matt, who's usually sitting across from me, will say, "Uranium? Can you even own uranium?" So I went out and I did a little research on that too. And the answer is yes.
Oh,
You
now
can.
you're on a list.
You can. I know, right there. Actually, in my research, I found out you can actually get uranium on Amazon. I mean, imagine that. But anyway, here's a couple of the caveats. One is it's got to be natural uranium, and it's got to be an unimportant quantity. And the unimportant quantity is defined by Title 10, Section 40.13 from the Code of Federal Regulations. So if you want to go to that extreme effort, I guess you can own a natural uranium amount that is an unimportant quantity. If you want more than an unimportant quantity, you need to have a radioactive materials license, which you get from your state or federal regulator. So hopefully that doesn't put me on the list, but I just couldn't resist as far as bringing that up, because that came up last week. And I think what you'll find hopefully in these shows is that, one, if I don't know, I'll say I don't know. I learned that a long time ago. Those are my 3 favorite words. And then I will go find out. And, you know, as long as Jim Whining and Dr. Paul are willing to let me come on Wednesday mornings, and we're grateful for that, by the way, I will have the answer within a week or two as far as that goes. So, with that said, the next part of the housekeeping is a little bit on stewardship, and I hope my program's working. Earlier this morning, I could not get this program to work, so just bear with me here as I switch over to this. This is what we've been trying to do for a while now, as far as keep up with a plan for stewardship. Okay, so this would be this week's lesson in stewardship. This is the source of your prosperity. The Bible is filled from cover to cover with goodness of God. Our Heavenly Father is always giving, loving, and generous toward His children. In Genesis, He gives the... Oh, did I read this last week? Was this last week's? In Genesis, He gives the man and woman a perfect Garden of Eden. In Revelation, we read about our ultimate home, a perfect and eternal heaven. Well, if I did do this last week, I'm going to go ahead and do it again, because it can't hurt to hear it twice. And then next week we'll have the final lesson in this series, which is Lesson 10. Thank you. In all the books in between, we read how God delighted in blessing His people. At the outset of the New Testament, we read how God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, as His ultimate gift of blessing to us. God is the source of all you need. He is the author of the whole life, eternal life prosperity plan. The sovereignty of God over all material wealth is stated clearly in 1 Chronicles 29:12. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all, and in your hand is power and might. And it lies in your hand to make great and to strengthen everyone. If we were to summarize David's statement in 3 short sentences, we might say, 1, the Lord is the owner of everything. 2, the Lord gives generously to His people. And 3, we do well to give Him thanks and praise for what He has given us. Jesus certainly agreed with this when He taught His disciples to conclude their time of prayer by saying, "For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever." Amen. God owns everything, has all authority to dispense with it as He chooses, and is worthy of all praise for what He does, and let it be so. David reflected about going up to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. Peace be within your walls, prosperity within your palaces. He gave us a prayer that we can pray for all Christians, a prayer that is totally in line with God's will for His people. The Bible is filled with verses that tell us of God's goodness, His inexhaustible resources, and His desire to make His people prosper. God's desire for you is prosperity, that you might have all that you need and the capacity to enjoy it. And that was the devotional that drew on 4 different Bible verses. One was 1 Chronicles 29:12, Matthew 6:13, Psalms 122, 6 and 7, and Psalms 34, 8 through 10. So that's a little bit on our stewardship lesson for today and stuff. Another thing that I did as far as research to follow up is we've been talking a little bit off and on, different times, about the national debt. And we talk about, how much some of these countries own and stuff like that. And I went out and I found out a little bit about our national debt. So I'm going to kind of work towards the end of the show with some numbers here. I found this very intriguing. It says the U.S. debt was $22 trillion as of February 11th, 2019. Most headlines focus on how much the U.S. owes China, one of the largest foreign owners. What many people don't know is that the Social Security Trust Fund, also known as your retirement money, owns most of the national debt. How does that work and what does it mean? And it's basically breaking it down. The debt is in 2 categories. You've got the U.S. Treasury, which manages the U.S. debt through its Bureau of Public Debt, and the debt that falls into 2 broad categories: intragovernmental holdings and debt held by the public. So in other words, you've got 2 main areas of debt that make up that $22 trillion. And one of the things I found that was very, very interesting was that China only have, well, I shouldn't say only because it's a lot of money, but of that 22 trillion, China is, I want to say, 1.3 trillion. And so anyway, let me get into this here real quick. The U.S. Treasury manages the U.S. debt through its Bureau of Public Debt, debt held by the public. Intergovernmental debt is 27%, and public debt is 73%. And the intergovernmental debt, this is the portion of the federal debt owed to 230 other federal agencies. In December of 18, intragovernmental holdings totaled 5.9 trillion, or 27% of the debt. Why would the government owe money to itself? Some agencies, like the Social Security Trust Fund, take in more revenue from taxes than they need. Rather than stick this cash under a giant mattress, these agencies buy U.S. treasuries with it. By owning treasuries, they transfer their excess cash to the general fund where it is spent. Of course, one day they will redeem their treasury notes for cash. The federal government will either need to raise taxes or issue more debt to give the agencies the money they will need. Which agencies own the most treasuries? Social Security by far and away is, let me see, Social Security, and it truncated a few words there, but I will tell you that Social Security and disability insurance makes up 48% of that. Federal retirement funds make up 22% of that. And then we have military retire funds are 14%. Cash on hand is 11%. And Medicare is 3%. So $5.85 trillion. And the U.S. Treasury publishes this in a monthly Treasury statement, Table 6, Schedule D, investments of federal government accounts and federal securities. The most recent data is from December of 18, and I found that very interesting. A little bit more about that public debt. Okay, here we go. The public holds the rest of the national debt of 16.1 trillion. Foreign governments and investors hold 30% of it. Individuals, banks, and investors hold 15%. The Federal Reserve holds 12, mutual funds hold 9, state and local governments own 5. The rest is held by pension funds, insurance companies, and savings bonds. So foreign investors and governments hold 40% of the 15.6 trillion that makes up the U.S. public debt. And in June of 2018, China owned 1.18 trillion of U.S. debt, and Japan owned 1.03 trillion. That's more than 1/3 of the foreign holdings, and I just found that amazing because we get caught up in talking about the debt at 22 trillion, and then implying that China holds the bulk of that. And I mean, let's face it, 1.3 trillion is a lot of money, but it's not all of it. So I mean, it's dispersed over both the intergovernmental agencies and then the public debt and so forth. So I don't know if that helps. I mean, I just found that intriguing to go out and research that. I mean, there's just a lot of information here, and I know on a radio show sometimes it's tough to talk too much numbers and all this kind of stuff. It gets into Federal Reserve 2.46 trillion, mutual funds 1.8 trillion, state and local government, including their pension funds, 984 billion, private pension funds 600 billion, banks 674 billion, and insurance companies 226 billion. And then last but not least, remember those things called U.S. savings bonds? Those sometimes turn out to be pretty good holdings. They're 158 billion. And then other holders such as individuals, government-sponsored enterprises, brokers and dealers, bank personnel, trust estates, corporate and non-corporate businesses, and other investors, 2.4 trillion. So just a lot of money that makes up that. And remember, when we talk about the $22 trillion that we have as far as debt, there's another, I think it's 20 trillion that is wrapped up in some of the entitlement programs and things. So overall, I mean, we've got a big number. And then if you start combining that with the other major countries in the world, I mean, the world as we know it and the central banks as we know them, there is a lot of global debt. And I think that's where you see a lot of this volatility in the markets these days is, you know, sometimes it hinges on an announcement, you know, by Jay Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve. You know, he says one thing and all of a sudden people start buying or selling depending on which way that goes and stuff. One of the reasons that gold went down a little bit yesterday is because of the strength of the dollar. You know, I mean, if the dollar goes up a little bit in its strength and people are starting to, you know, move out of gold, and remember, all these things we've talked about are usually based on supply and demand. So all of a sudden, you've got, you know, this huge supply because people are wanting to get rid of it because the dollar is stronger. They're moving those dollars, you know, into, or those holdings into dollars, and you've got people at that level that will do that. So I know sometimes that's hard to envision, you know, that there's institutions out there and there's people of such high net worth, but there are where they will do trades and decisions based on what some of us might consider to be very small quantities as far as the difference and stuff. You know, I just had so much chalked up for today's show. I'm not going to have a chance to get to some of the other things. But in future shows, we're going to be getting into a strategy to accumulate wealth. We're going to be getting into a strategy to help with fundraising for your ministries. And that was one I was wanting to get to here before the end of the show, but that's going to have to wait till next week. So we'll spend some time on that one and talk about how to have some fundraisers to enhance the fundraising for your ministries and so forth. And I'm getting looks from Matt and Jason that's kind of like, Tony, you're almost out of time. How much time we got, guys?
Got about a minute.
A minute?
Minute and a half.
Okay. Well, then, once again, let's do this. Do not forget, Gold and Silver Workshop next Thursday. That's October the 10th at 5:30. And Ryan Long will be in town. Ryan has been doing this for working in the gold and silver world for 40 years. His dad owned National Gold Consultants for 3 decades plus, and a couple years ago, you know, Ryan took over and bought his dad out and let his dad go off into retirement, and rightfully so after a long, successful career. But I think you will find Ryan very, very interesting. Some of his stories, some of his strategies. He works with a lot of advisors around the country, is published, is quoted, and to get him to come to Springfield, Missouri is just so exciting because I know myself, I've learned so much just in the short while I've known this gentleman. So if you can make it, we'd love to see you. Remember, we'll have a drawing at the end for 1 ounce of silver. And at this point, let me just say thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully, Brad Gibson and Christina's half an hour of talking about the VA benefits and some of the things that need to work together with the Advantage plans and the veterans benefits and Medicare and so forth were of interest and helped. Even if we helped one person out in the audience, then today was a success. So thank you so much. Enjoy doing the show, and I think I'm out of time.